joining us on the Nigeria bomb blast and its implications for WEF on Africa. In 2 weeks' time, we're joined in studio now by Martyn Davies, CEO of Frontier Advisory. Martyn, thanks for joining us today. I actually want us to go back to a similar situation which unfolded in Kenya with the Westgate attacks, the bomb blast that took place there. You were there. In fact, you actually went back after the bomb blasts. The way the government handled that situation?
Well, it's interesting. I was in Nairobi in last year, September, I think it was, and you know, what shocked me, obviously the events were incredibly shocking and tragic, but beyond that was how the government responded to it, or lack of response. I think in particular cases, in Kenya's case, the government, and Nigeria's case perhaps as well, need to approach security, domestic security, with far greater seriousness. Whether it's, as Mutala was correctly saying, whether it's so-called sort of hard targets or soft targets, regardless. It's only now, seemingly, that because the attack has taken place, this attack today, this morning, in and around Abuja, leading up to World Economic Forum, all of a sudden, us are now suddenly concerned. These attacks have been going on for a few years now. I believe even in the case of Boko Haram, that over 200 schools have been torched in recent months in Nigeria as well. So this is an ongoing onslaught on the state by people who don't clearly even believe in the nation state. But going back to the Kenyan situation, as you said, it didn't get out too much in terms of news. But subsequent to that Westgate attack, there was also an attempted attack on the airport a few weeks afterwards. You know, and why do governments in this part of the world largely often do not take the necessary corrective steps to counter such acts of absolute terrorism and violence?
But how do you, Martyn? I mean, certainly on Twitter and the social media is full of exactly what happened in Abuja. 4 guys were in a Volkswagen Golf. They parked it in a very busy area where people were catching buses. They left and the bomb went off. How do you, as a government, short of cordoning off every area where lots of people are together, how do you address something like
I think like in that case it's almost impossible, as I said, and you know, maybe I'm being too harsh in my criticism, but at the same time I believe a lot of the reaction of the Nigerian military to many of the Boko Haram sort of situations is equally bad as well, has not been dealt with properly. As Colin Coleman was saying earlier, yes, need a rule of law, less needs to be applied equally to all. But at the same time, a professionalization and professional response by the state itself also needs to be in place.
You deal in frontier markets, that's your speciality. Is this going to change perceptions towards Nigeria now that it is such a high profile? We'll get to WEF in just a moment, but does this happen in various parts of the world, and do investors, as Colin was saying, see through it and they invest anyway, knowing that at some point in time it'll pass?
I think more of the latter. Companies tend to have a relatively short memory. Examples such as the India Mumbai bombings a few years ago now, Bali bombings, Indonesia. Again, similarly, very complex political economies, very heterogeneous, a lot of internal tensions. I mean, a year, 2 years later, these bombings were practically, these acts of terrorism were practically forgotten about. I think what we often forget, and unfortunately we tend to be superficial, generally speaking, is people look at these big, populous, complex emerging markets purely as an FMCG play. And if you can sell products, you can sell goods or whatever it may be, and or do business or finance in these economies, it comes down to the bottom line, I'm afraid. And
so it's quite cynical.
It is.
You send your disposable staff, perhaps, not your CEO there, and they go and live in a hellhole. I suppose like South Africa under apartheid.
Not too dissimilar, I'm afraid. It's ultimately comes down to business, and therefore perhaps is somewhat superficial. So unless, interesting to see what happens in the next week or two. Typically these sort of attacks we even saw in Kenya, as you alluded to, and as you mentioned, they don't come in a single attack. There's maybe a second or a third sort of phase planned as well, in almost goading the government to say, well, where's your response? So this will be leading up in and around Abuja, perhaps elsewhere in the country.
Are you still going to WEF?
I'm booked to go to World Economic Forum, as per usual, to the Africa Summit, and we're obviously doing some work there as well. So hopefully things get under control. Mutala, speaking from London, was saying about sort of, you know, maybe more strategic assets being protected, airports, hotels, etc. But of course it's concerning, it has to be. So as things stand right now, yes, we'll be going, and but of course we have to reassess the situation closer to the time.
We wish you a safe trip and a safe return in one piece.
Most importantly, thank you very much.
Well, that was Martyn Davies, CEO of Frontier Advisory.